Good afternoon. Welcome to the City Council meeting for Tuesday, January 17th, 2023. Ms. Hilbrick, will you please call roll?
Yes, sir. Councilman De La Garza?
Yes, I am present.
Councilwoman Solis?
Here.
Councilman Crocker?
Here.
Councilwoman Scott?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Young?
Here.
Councilman Lofgren?
Here.
And Mayor Bognight.
Here. All right, if everybody will please rise for the pledges, followed by a moment of silence. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. Oh, good afternoon, Mr. Garza. Any announcements and or reminders?
I should probably turn on my mic. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. We do have some announcements, followed by a special recognition. On the announcement side, from Municipal Court, we want to remind the public that we have an outreach docket, which will be held at the Salvation Army, located at 1302 North Lois Street on Friday, January 20th from 9 to 11 a.m. On behalf of the library, the first Friends of the Library book sale for 2023 has started and runs through Saturday, January 21st. The sale is open during library hours and available to everyone. These events help provide program support funding for the Victoria Public Library. On the public safety front, both our police department and fire department are kicking off their Lunch and Learn program on Wednesday, January 18th at the Community Center Annex from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. The week session has been sponsored by VCS Security, and our topic is Smartphone Tips for Beginners. VCS Security will be closing their location to bring their employees to help all attendees get more acclimated with their devices. The VFD will also have members on site providing free health screenings. Those are this evening's announcements.
Well, thank you. How about this some recognition? I think it's due.
Absolutely. So as many of you know, this weekend was a very busy weekend, specifically for utility crews dealing with a 20-inch water main break. And if you can pop up the pictures real quick. As a refresher, by now you're aware that we did have a pretty significant break in a 20-inch main line on Saturday evening at roughly 7 p.m. at the intersection of Ben Jordan and Airline. Within the hour, crews had the break isolated and they were beginning to dig it up. By 9 p.m., crews and the staff at our surface water treatment plant had found a way to get water back into the south pressure plane. And so a lot of residents and properties in the south pressure plane saw a decrease in water pressure within that couple of hours between 7 and 9 p.m. And so kudos to staff for addressing that in a very quick manner. The crews themselves, though, worked tirelessly overnight, worked almost 20 hours to get this break fixed. By now, you're also aware, of course, that we had to issue the boil water notice that evening. And even though they were able to get the water pressure resolved fairly quickly, it did drop below the threshold of 20 PSI, which is the threshold that TCQ has in place and requires the boil water notice. We did lose millions of gallons of water. We did deplete a water tower, and also when that happens, typically leads to a boil water notice as well. And so we obviously went through that process. Staff worked very hard to collect the samples on Sunday, and we were able to end the boil water notice by Sunday at roughly 3 p.m., which coincidentally was also around the time that the pipe and everything was fixed. There was a leak that...
Monday.
I'm sorry. We ended the boil water notice.
I just don't want anyone to think they were boiling water longer than they had to.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I still haven't slept. No, I'm just kidding. Regardless, crews did an excellent job. There was a leak that remained, and that was actually fixed today. And so we wanted to very specifically call out all the personnel involved by name. Austin Anderson, our distribution and collections manager. Santos Ibarra, water distribution supervisor. Eddie Garza and Rodney Rodriguez, utility crew leaders. Joshua Blackman, Marky Gaitan, Adolfo Arispe, Reynaldo Trevino, our utility maintenance workers. Jeffrey Fishbeck, utility line locator. Irma Ruiz and Todd Hoff with our surface water treatment plant. Gordon Williams, our chief operator at the plant. Kevin Post, the manager, and Curtis Moyer, our maintenance supervisor. All of these individuals did a great job that evening. Specifically, the individuals on the left were the ones that worked the most hours, and so we want to give them a special shout out because they really are a true testament to the dedication that our employees show. I had the privilege to be out there the evening, and then the next day, I had the luxury of going home and sleep in between that. Right? They didn't, and so they did a remarkable job of just working through that for the benefit of our water system, which can easily be taken for granted, but is obviously critical to our quality of life. And so kudos to them. And so I know they're not here because they're still working. But if you wouldn't mind joining me in a round of applause for them, they greatly deserve that.
I'd just like to add to that, I stopped at a business on my way here, just had to stop and visit on something else, and was talking to him about the water leak, and he said the pressure went down. He walked all around his business to see if he had a leak, and then it was solved again, and he didn't really think any more of it. And I know it was very major for us, but they got the pressure back so quickly that I think a lot of people felt like, oh, maybe it was a little blip in the radar. So truly kudos.
Yeah, anytime you can make that 20-inch water main look like a blip on the radar.
Yeah.
It's a very, very great job by the entire team. Jesus, Ken Gill, and everybody else on here, great job. Thank you very much. I've heard nothing but compliments from residents of the city. It shows what type of first-class operation you're running, and everyone took notice, so thank you so much.
Appreciate that.
I have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I've lived in the area 6 years. This is the second time that we've had a break there. I think that first one was a little bit closer to the front where those water tanks are. And looking at the pictures, that water line, that pipe, that old pipe, how much do we still have right there on Airline?
Ken, do you know?
I just don't want another break here, you
Sure.
know.
We have quite a bit left on airline. We are gonna, at some point, we'll present kind of what happened and, where we go forward, some things that we learned. That is one of them. We've already got the map put together showing all the cast iron lines 12-inch and above. So I can share that when we get it cleaned up, but we've got that map together. But there's quite a bit left in town.
Okay. I
We've
just
got
want,
that map working.
okay, thank you, Ken. And thank you to all the crews. I did stop and talk to some of the guys there, and I told them how thankful we were that they were out there working 24/7, so thank you again.
Yeah, and a couple days before that, my street, I told Mr. Garza this, had experienced a break in a fire hydrant line, and the crews were very responsive and are only down for about 4 or 5 hours, 6 hours maybe, to repair that entire line and get everybody back up. They gave a good estimate, and they beat it, so I was very impressed.
While we're giving kudos to the city, this one's on the power outage, I think last Wednesday afternoon. It affected the east side of town. And I called Mr. Garza's office because I didn't know where else to call. And of course, they already knew about it, but I mentioned that the intersection at Airline and Stockbauer the lights were out, and within 10 minutes, there were stop signs out there. So, I mean, we're very responsive, and I appreciate that. Unfortunately, there was an accident at that intersection as well, but they got out there and marked everywhere that needed.
Excellent. Any other
No, sir.
items for public and employee recognition? Then we'll move on to items from council. Does anybody for the dais have anything they'd like to bring up?
One other kudo for this weekend, when we weren't dealing with water, we did have the Texas Amateur Athlete Federation Games. I'm not sure if that's exactly what it's called, but those were a lot of fun and a lot of good activity in town. So, and I want to thank whoever it was that invited me, somebody with the city, and so I felt kind of obligated to go see what it was all about, and it was great.
Yeah, if anybody in the public hasn't gone to see it, it is fun to go watch. It's just normal people just trying to compete at different events. The wheelchair basketball is really fun to watch. I watched some pickleball this weekend, learned that I don't want to enter any tournaments. But anyway, it was a great deal. We have 2 more weekends coming up, one in February, one in March. So be on the lookout for those 2 that come up. Okay, if there's no one else that would like to speak during items from council, we'll go into citizens' communication and have Benjamin Lopez first.
Mayor Bachnight, City
Hey.
Councilman. It was a pleasure to see you guys at the ribbon coming in the Enchanted Gardens. We didn't make enough money to get them qualified to put in an application due to being on SSI and SSTI, but life moved on. Well, in the beginning of December, my grandmother finally died in California. My mom had to go up there and take care of some business, and I had to move up out of the flower shop into the big house now. So now I got some shoes to fill. And the reason I'm here is because January 4th, Montekia passed away. And you know her from the 2017 Boot Fest. That dog was beautiful to me. We walked everywhere, Christ Kitchen. We even walked to the mall one time. She was always there with me. Well, I've been volunteering at the Gables Project, their donation center. I know we could bury our dogs in my backyard, but I took her and I put her in that bin so she could guard me every time I walk into my office. Every time I walk out, I thank her for being there. I sit at my little bus stop, that's the paratransit. You know, I'm still serving my community. But losing that apartment, it crushed my wife. It didn't crush me because I was excited. I still live at my mom's house. You know, my mom's doing her thing and I'm doing mine. I'm still at St. Mary's, Our Lady of Lords, and I just wanted to wish you all a blessed new year. Dr. Young, I'm gonna be seeing you pretty soon again. You know, and this is the most well-dressed I've ever been here. I'm usually coming from the parks or the streets, and this time I came from home. And it felt good to call Victoria home again. I haven't had to go nowhere else home in 8 years. And being from a dysfunctional family, bouncing around every 6 months, it feels good to have a bedroom set. It feels all those necessary things that a lot of us take for granted. I'm still living off my $10 a day, and I'm still doing what I gotta do. Fostetti's, Little Joe's, you know, Joe's Pizza Place I found out has a good $10 lunch special. So, you know, if I get back to my community and I continue with St. Gabriel's Project, right now I'm on suspension because after all these tragic accidents and losses, they want me to take some time off to heal. I think I'm fine. They think I need some time. They think I need a med change. They think I need this. I go, no, I just need to keep praying. I need to keep coming to the council meetings or seeing them on TV. I need to keep doing my project, doing my adoration, maintaining myself. I go out at night because I'm a grown man. I'm 52 years old. You know, I'm not 25. I'm not looking for trouble. I'm just looking for a game of pool, soda water, and a drink. I walk back home. This new Dutch Lanes has opened up, the old Newmans. And I've learned Dutch Lanes is the name of something pretty negative over here, like kind of like Las Vegas style. Dutch Lanes is known for. So, I mean, being around local people and learning the history and being part of them, it's the greatest feeling I could have in my life, and that was my Christmas present. My Christmas present was being in Victoria, not in California, having to deal with the drama and grief of my family losing 86 grandkids, 8 children. So the dynamics wasn't going to be safe for my mind. And I would have said something the wrong way to the wrong person at the wrong time. And I didn't want to do that. So I stayed away, and I gave you guys all the thanks and the praise because Victoria still had things for me to do. So God bless you guys, and Montekia says goodbye for the last time.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Jesse Perez, I'm sorry.
Hello, everybody. Happy New Year's. My name is Jesse Perez. I accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior many years ago. I'm retired from Rexco, and my relatives, they all come from O'Connor Ranch. I was raised as a cowboy, as a rancher. But when I came to Victoria, Texas in 1972, I noticed there was a lot of Spanish girls. Because I come from the industrial code, there's not that many girls over there. But anyway, I joined the Army. I was IBM 129, key punch operator. I didn't know the Lord. I heard about him. And then I came out of the Army, and got married, But anyway, I repented from my sins. I believe righteousness exalts our nation. Righteousness is doing the right things, walking in integrity, and I chose to walk in integrity. I believe I minister at the Juvenile Teen Center. I try to be an encouragement to the young men, give them hope, tell them the right way to go. And and I'm just now starting to go back to jail ministry. And I just want to encourage the men, tell them God loves them, Jesus loves them. He's coming soon, and that we have to be ready, you know. And every Thursday night, I like to welcome people who want to go, who really, really, really pray. I like to welcome you to come to, on Thursday nights to intercession. We pray for our policemen. We pray that the criminals get caught. And if you don't believe me, go over there at 6:30 and watch the women, the other men praying. We're praying for our Victoria. We're praying for the economy to get better. And we just want the best for people, you know. And right now we're against. I abhor evil. I hate what is evil. I want to walk in righteousness. I have grandchildren. I have my son, and I want my grandchildren to be raised up the right way. Because I'm going to be 69 years old pretty soon, and I want my children to learn the right way, you know. And so I just want to encourage the people to help Ms. Gay Potak. As my first, I want to help her and her group, you know, come against the corrupt, it's real corrupt books that they have at the library, you know, and we need to come against that. We need to stop that, you know. And so I just want to thank you for all the good things. I believe all power is from God. All power is from God. Romans chapter 13. And I pray that the people would learn to do good, that they do good, because if not, the policemen are going to get them. The policemen, the law is going to get them. So thank you, okay?
Thank you, Mr. Perez. Jim Hester.
Hello again. Last time I was here, I mentioned about the Attorney General Paxton and what he had been asked by someone to put down the details of what they were doing and their programs they were doing. And it basically boiled down to this, that whether you're a parent or whether you're a neighbor, whether you're a teacher or whatever, if you do something that causes a young person to be harmed, you basically have a problem. The harm can be chemical problems, it could be physical changes, whatever. All those things are going to be a problem. He called them basically illegal. I had not heard about that. I guess he came out with that statement in response to a legislator about a year ago. But I don't know how that communication happened and came out, but I saw it. And my question now is basically this, and see, I was a technical advisor basically to a plant in Singapore, a plant in Maitland, Ontario, a plant in Wilton, England, a plant in Orange, Texas, of all places, as well as the one in Victoria. And basically, every one of them had government oversight that looked at them and asked them, what are you doing? How are you making sure that you're taking care of the safety and the environment and stuff like that? And I would be part of those meetings and help describe what we were doing and what we would do to make things better. My question to you, and the question is not just to the librarians or anything like that, but when something like what Paxton wrote comes out, how do you basically apply that in terms of teaching people, having classes to say, hey, this is what the legal representation is saying is happening now and what you have to do to be safe. I don't want to find out that some teacher or some librarian or even my neighbor had basically done something to cause a kid to be harmed and turned out that, well, he claims he just didn't know those laws and those regulations. So I don't know what you guys do, but I certainly hope that when something like Paxton comes, his document comes out, that you're able to communicate that within the city of Victoria to make sure that no one is accidentally doing something to harm a kid and fall into the problems there. And it does apply to the things that people are talking about on the library stuff. So I hope you guys do that. I don't know, what is it, a once a year renewal of explaining people, okay, here's the recent laws. Victoria is going to do at least as good as those laws are as they move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hester. Casey Harris.
Good evening, Mayor Bachnight, council members. I'm Casey Harris. I live in Victoria with my husband and my 3 children. We watched the last city council meeting online, and it's obvious you guys are being thoughtful and you want to get the juvenile policy right. It sounded like most of you agreed with the content of the policy that was voted on and adopted by the Library Advisory Board. We looked over the new draft that is being considered tonight, and there are changes in it that will have a significant negative impact. First, in selection criteria, it now says, quote, materials selected for the juvenile collection shall not include explicit, quote, end quote, and then continues with the list. This new word explicit is an adjective, meaning it modifies and qualifies everything that follows. So now the entire list is subjective and up for debate and opinion. Whose opinion of explicit do we use? Now, anything can still be purchased with the excuse of, well, in my opinion, this isn't explicit. The list was clear and simple the way the board wrote it, without adjectives. Next, both bullet points relating to gender dysphoria were completely removed instead of adjusted. Do we really want kids and teens in our community to be introduced to body dysmorphic ideas? To be told if they don't fit every male or female stereotype, they might actually have the wrong body? What about the tomboys or the effeminate guys? These books will confuse kids and teach them inaccurate ideas about who they are. On a personal side note, I grew up with a sister who was the epitome of a tomboy. If you had asked her if she was a boy or a girl, my brothers had trained her to say she was a boy. But that's exactly what it was, an idea put into her head by somebody else. Thankfully, this way of thinking on my sister's part was not nurtured or groomed by our parents. Yes, she played ball on the boys' teams until middle school, but it was still clear she was, in fact, a girl. I fully believe if she was growing up in today's world with parents that condone these mental feelings, she would have a completely different life than she has today, which is a proud, beautiful woman married to a man and just given birth to their second child. That's what this is all about. To protect the children and not make them think something is wrong with their bodies, and to try to make changes in ways that are permanent and now being looked at as possible crimes. Let's give them other options that are healthy, more healthy, both physically and mentally. Back to the policy. The sentence explaining what happens to currently owned inappropriate books was deleted. Why? What will happen to the books with sexual content that are already in the juvenile section? Why not include the clear directive to move them to the adult shelves? Wasn't that the whole point of all these updates? Finally, the only option left for concerned citizens is to put in a reevaluation request, but now there's a waiting period of 2 years if there's multiple requests. So to sum it up, the final result of these changes are: 1, anything can be purchased for juveniles under the loophole of explicit; 2, the current appropriate books don't have to be moved to the adult section; and 3, citizens have to wait longer and longer to express their concerns. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Harris. Harley Fisk.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, and interested citizens. During the past several months, there's been a lot of discussion about the library. It seems that there are two distinct viewpoints. One side is trying to eliminate or hide any book that does not meet their criteria. Their criteria seems to be confusing, at least to those on the other side, like me. We all agree that the public library should not be in the business of spreading pornography. Where we disagree is on what the definition of pornography is. Those who wish to eliminate or hide certain books confuse the issue when many of the books that they find objectionable refer to LGBTQ or racial themes. You often hear them use terms like grooming. To me, that is a clue of what their intentions truly are. You also hear frequent biblical quotations. I will not pretend that I am an expert on the Bible. I don't have to be. The library is a public institution. It is not a religious institution. The library serves all people in the community, not just those who attend a certain church. I maintain that it is the duty of parents to provide their children with the tools they need to function in today's ever-changing environment. Tools like trust, honesty, and respect for others. Children who are out in the world will meet all kinds of people. Most likely they know children of other races, children who come from broken homes, children who have same-sex parents, children with LGBTQ family members. Why should children be prevented from reading about these same people? These are the same people who make up our community. We need to allow our professional librarians to decide library policy. We should not leave these important decisions to individuals who lack the training and compassion and have a hidden or not so hidden agenda. I said earlier that I was not an expert on the Bible. I do remember this one phrase which kind of sums things up for me. Just as I have loved you, you must love one another. I do not see the love coming from those who wish to eliminate or hide books that help our community become more inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fisk. Brent Van Sickle.
Greetings, Mr. Mayor and City Council. My name is Brent Van Sickle. I live in Victoria County, and thank you for allowing me to speak. The bailiff passed out 3 items for you to reference: a book cover of George by Alex Gino, opinion number KP-0401, and summary from our Attorney General, Ken Paxton. Bullet points removed from the juvenile collection development policy. George by Alex Gino, and I have the cover of it here, yes, as well as you have. For what age do you think this book is appropriate? Does it look like a picture book for a young child? Would you expect to find this book in the section for 8 to 12-year-olds? Actually, this book, George, is the #1 most challenged book of 2018, 2019, and 2020, according to the American Library Association. I would like to share an excerpt from George, page 51. So George knew it could be done. A boy could become a girl. She had since read on the internet that you could take girl hormones that would change your body, and you could get a bunch of different surgeries if you wanted them and had the money. This was called transitioning. You could even start before you were 18 with pills called androgen blockers that stopped the boy hormones already inside you from turning your body into a man's. I noticed in the proposed juvenile collection development policy, 2 bullet points have been removed from the selection criteria, part 3. Content introducing gender dysphoria to a child, and content telling a child to consider elective procedures for gender transitioning. Additionally, under several provisions of the Texas Family Code in Chapter 261, quote unquote, sex change procedures and treatments when performed on children can legally constitute child abuse. You will find this in the summary pages from our Attorney General Ken Paxton's office. This includes physical and emotional harm associated with these procedures. Many unattended children come to the library after school to do homework while their parents are at work. These Victoria parents and citizens rely on the library to provide a safe environment for their children. How many other books in the Victoria Library's juvenile section will stay on the shelves or be added in the future purchases that introduce Victoria's children to a path of what the state of Texas considers child abuse? Will our community be held liable for not waking up to this responsibility regarding the children in our care? Freedom with responsibility is the only true freedom. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Van Sickle. Wanda Ulrey.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I would first like to thank you for listening to so many people who are concerned citizens about reevaluating the books in the Victoria Public Library concerning our children. After reviewing the agenda for today and seeing the proposed juvenile collection development policy, I was dismayed to see several items that were not mentioned. Specifically, the two bullet points about the content that introduces gender dysphoria and elective procedures for gender transitioning. Per my understanding, according to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM, gender dysphoria is a mental health issue. And in my opinion, this is not discrimination or a First Amendment right issue that might cause fear to you of placing these bullet points into the juvenile collection development policy. I believe the books that introduce a child to gender dysphoria should be relocated to the adult section. And the reports that I have read say that if you plant the seed of transgenderism, puberty blockers, sex change, which is gender mutilation, the child now, by default, becomes inquisitive, looks into it, and will start contemplating it. You are moving something that children don't even think about to the front row of the brain. These books may start in a benign way and then grow into something cancerous. Again, the child has a fertile mind, and now the child is thinking that they may be in the wrong body because that is what is presented to their young minds. Ladies and gentlemen, use common sense. Presenting children with books of this nature will cause their little minds to grasp and explore to their detriment. I encourage you to put the innocence of children first in deciding this collection policy. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Silvery. Catherine Olson.
Good afternoon. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. I would just like to say, which means I'll probably run out of time in reading this, but I would just like to say that I was raised in a home where there was not enough food, there was not enough love, there was not enough protection. And so children today have enough things to deal with without all the craziness. It's really something that I believe every adult here is going to answer to Almighty God over. And we think we can, I hate to use the phrase get away with things, but we think that this will be okay and nobody really sees, but we have an audience of one who sees everything. And so we just need to really think about that. So recently we appointed new board members and gave them clear direction. Those board members worked hard on our behalf, on Victoria's behalf. They discussed, voted on, and approved collection development policies that would bring clarity and consistency to the library. Libraries and bookstores all organize their materials by content, genre, and age of the reader. The policy passed by the library board is a continuation of the organizational efforts the library already uses. The original policy would simplify the jobs of library staff. It gave them clear guidelines as they purchase and organize materials. The law consistently protects minors from adult materials and restricts their decision-making ability for their own protection. The original policy helped the city place reasonable safeguards on the materials that city employees provide to children and teens. The original policy showed our community that the innocence of children would be respected and protected. It showed that our library would put parents first and give children a safe area to browse while their parents sort through books on hard topics. And as was said earlier, those who don't have parents with them are more at risk than anybody else, and they are the disenfranchised. Now the community can only speak once every 2 years on a book that is found to be totally inappropriate. Even if 50 people come into the library and complain about a certain book, that doesn't matter. We get one complaint, as if there's been one complaint. The Library Advisory Board has bylaws that state that one purpose of the board is to develop and establish immediate and long-range policies for the library. Why have these bylaws if we are not going to follow them? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Sarah Zeller.
Hello, Mayor Bachnight and City Council members. I'm Sarah Zeller. I'm one of the new Library Advisory Board members. Thank you so much for all of your work on this and for the subcommittee. I'm sure that you've met frequently over the last 2 weeks. We appreciate your time and all of your effort. I wanted to just clarify something quickly for you, just in case you weren't sure about our thought process. The reason that the board presented a policy to you that said juvenile and young adult. I know that when all of us use the term young adult, we're thinking of someone college age or older. That is not the way the term is used in library world or the literary world. To read from you from the American Library Association website. They are the largest library association, and their guidelines are followed by many libraries. The American Library Association defines young adults as individuals between 12 and 18 years of age. So the reason the board wanted to include that term, young adult with juvenile, on the policy is that we were thinking in terms of kids and teens, that people under 18 are still minors, they are still under the protection and responsibility of adults. That is the reason that we put those two parts together. If we make the change to move young adult back over to the adult section or to the adult policy, what you're really voting for is to have teens and adults covered under one policy, which would mean all of the changes, the list of things that we'd watch for sexually explicit content, it would not cover any of the books for teens. All of those books that are labeled young adult, they're published for teenagers, they're written by authors for that age group. With the changes on the draft that I've seen tonight, all of those books would stay exactly where they are. I've heard some of the very explicit excerpts read here at City Council. The ones that you've heard that were brought to your attention are from the young adult, I would call it teenage, shelves. And that is how those shelves are treated in the library world. One idea that was presented to the board was that we could put a sign on the side of the shelves that says recommended ages 18 plus. That's a possibility. I think it's going to be hard to change the habits of teenagers who are already used to going to those shelves. On my way here tonight, I was stopped at a red light, looked, I could see the young adult shelves. There was a girl about 13 or 14, and there was another girl who looked about 8 or 9. I didn't see any adults around. So they are going to those shelves. They're used to going to those shelves. I would suggest we still include them with the juvenile policy and think of it as kids and teens. Thank you. We will be here if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Zeller. Ms. Cindy, I can't remember the last name of it, Herdman? Oh, yes.
Sorry.
No, it's all right.
Sorry for my printing. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor and City Council. Thank you for letting me speak to you tonight. Just want to clarify some of the things I said last time. As far as, I want you to know, God's agenda is to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. Satan's agenda is to steal, kill, and destroy. We can either agree with God or the enemy of our souls. The depopulation agenda has many facets, and removing children's reproductive organs is only one of them. Even for a puppy, it's not recommended to neuter her until all her organs are fully developed. If these children still want to transition later in life, wouldn't it be wiser to wait until their organs are fully developed and they are sure this is what they really want? Why would anyone agree with a child to make life-altering decisions that has shown to come with a lot of health issues. You might as well agree with your child to allow them to eat all the sweets they want or take drugs or alcohol just because they want to. A strategy of the enemy is to attack our identity. Jesus' first temptation was to place doubt on what the Father had just said about him. When I was 20, for almost a year, I would see a man. He was in a wheelchair outside a five and dime store in downtown Houston. He had no legs and only one arm and hand that he used for selling pencils. One day he was inside the store and I glanced at him but quickly turned away. At that moment, the Lord asked me, "Why won't you look at him?" The Lord said to me, I love him and I want you to give him some money. A few weeks passed, and while in prayer, the Lord reminded me that I had not given this man the money, and the next day would be my last opportunity to see him. The next day, I gave him the money, and that was the last time I did see him. I tell you these things because God's love for us is not based on what we think about ourselves or which body parts we have or don't have. He loves us because he is love. We've all sinned, and he is the one perfect sacrifice that took the punishment we deserved. And I'm asking you to read the stories of those who have transitioned back. If as adults these children still want to pursue surgery, then that is their prerogative. And to address another thing, I have known young ladies. I had a friend that had several siblings, and because her parents never gave her enough love, she went out looking for love as a teenager. And by the time she did get married, she had a hard time in her marriage because sex became, she was an object. It wasn't because it was a commitment, it was an object. And then I've talked to other young ladies who were molested as children, and it messed with their minds. So this is not really about LGBTQ, it's just about sex for children and transitioning them when they, to a point where it'd be impossible for them to have children if they want to later. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Herndon. Michael Von der Rohe.
Good evening, Mayor, Council.
Good evening.
I just wanted to thank the Victoria Police Department. They got a grand jury indictment on a sex offender in the trailer park, and he was dating the trailer park manager, and she had a 4-year-old daughter, and, I don't think there's no laws against that, but that just seems like it's improper because, when you're sleeping, you can't be watching your daughter and stuff. But anyway, he's got an arraignment hearing February, and just wanted to thank the police department, for taking care of the sex offenders and everything else. The San Antonio Police Department also looked on his Facebook and saw something to the words of the effect that I'm proud to be a pedophile, And this is the type of people, the trailer park owner allows to live, in the trailer park and rent. And, I don't agree with it, but it's his choice. And the only place I know in Texas where you have to give a warning if you're a sex offender is Gonzales. You have to put a placard. I wish, the city council could have some kind of law where the sex offenders could put a placard up because 1 in 289 people are sex offenders in Victoria and Victoria County. So you take 65,000 and divide by 289, and that's how many sex offenders are living here. And a lot of the people, when they're sex offenders, they're supposed to update their registry. And this was one of the people who didn't update his registry. And if he's wondering where his car is, code enforcement took care of it for him and everything. So he needs to change his address to the Victoria County Jail. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Von der Rohe. All right, with that, we'll conclude citizens' communication. We don't have any items tonight with public hearings, so we'll go into the consent agenda.
Item D1 on the consent agenda is the adoption of minutes of the regular meeting on January 3rd, 2023. Item D2 is a resolution awarding the annual NFPA firefighter medical assessment and physical contract to Life Scan Wellness Centers in the amount not to exceed $66,000. And item D3 is a resolution designating authorized signatories for the Hurricane Harvey CDBG Disaster Recovery Program.
So moved.
Second.
Yeah, a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item E1.
Item E1 is a resolution considering the adoption of the library collection development policies.
All right, we have, from the last meeting, a motion on the table that Ms. Scott had made and Mr. De La Garza had seconded. So, is there any changes to that motion to reflect any changes of the committee?
I would like to offer an amendment
Okay,
to the, and we're talking about the juvenile policy or both policies?
juvenile policy right now, we'll take one at a time.
If everybody could pull it up on their screen.
Mayor, do you, just really briefly, do we think it might be a good idea to walk through the committee work first?
Would that be all right?
Yeah, that's a good idea. So
Okay.
everybody's on the same page?
Right.
Okay, yeah, I have the one in front of me with all the markups on it. And it didn't say,
I'm
Mayor,
not sure I do.
briefly, I was just, if I can jump in real quick.
yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just wanted to let everybody on council know that after the last meeting, when y'all elected or selected Councilman Young, Councilman Crocker, and Councilman De La Garza as the committee on this issue, we did meet following that. They were all three presented with some alternative language and sorts of things to consider, and the drafts in front of you that are attached to the agenda are the changes that they made that evening that they agreed on. I do have a hard copy of each of them for y'all if you would like that, just so you had something to write on. If that might make this easier, I can hand it to Officer Collins to pass out to y'all.
See some head nods up here, so that'd be great.
I've got one. Yeah, I have both. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, the one that's been handed out is not redlined, so
No.
if you could go through that.
Yes, I'm gonna go through the whole thing again, because I do have the red line in front of me right now that Ms. Lacy sent to me. So the first one, and we've talked about this before, the purpose of this policy is to, and the while was changed from an and. So while following the guiding principles of intellectual freedom, and then added to it was, and the generally accepted community standards of Victoria residents. Is there any-
And that was, Mayor and Council, that was a change that I made when drafting it. It made more grammatical sense than the way that it was before. So that was not a committee change, that was just a grammar change for that particular bullet point.
Okay,
Where are you at? Okay, while is changed. Okay.
the next change was just adding a bullet point, the last bullet point, and it's just the bullet point, not the verbiage, so. Then we go to the philosophy of the collection development on page 1 still. It was changed on the second line, and was added before enlightenment. After enlightenment, it previously stated to satisfy the curiosity of a community of children and adolescents, and that was struck out. And you go down to the fourth line at the end, the choice of library materials by users is an individual matter. And then the last sentence was added, responsibility for the reading and viewing of materials for children and adolescents rests with the parent or guardian. Right.
What was that, before that, what was it? There was another line item you went through.
I said that after enlightenment, there was a sentence that, or some words in there that said, to satisfy the curiosity of a community of children and adolescents, that was struck out. Okay. Then the next is page 2, selection criteria. The materials, goes to the very bottom, materials selected for the juvenile collection shall not include, and this was a recent add, explicit, and I don't know why it's a colon. Is that just, all those things are considered explicit, and then there's also a colon after limit to after that?
It's explicit, and then I think that's to modify every one of those words. Explicit images, explicit illustrations, explicit. It looks odd, but I think.
Okay.
I'm not on the committee, though. Is that why it's there?
Yes. I believe that's accurate, yes.
Okay. Including but not limited to, and this is, I'm sorry, I'm just going through these two in my head here. The last two bullet points that we had last time are the ones that read content that introduces or promotes gender dysphoria or may cause a child younger than 18 years of age to question if they have gender dysphoria, or content that encourages a child younger than 18 years of age to consider elective procedures for gender transitioning, including reassignment surgeries, removal of otherwise healthy body parts, or administration of puberty-blocking drugs or physiologic doses of testosterone or estrogen. Those two were taken out. And I want to make sure, if we are going to take them out, that we feel like the rest of the policy covers those two items.
I don't think it does. I think something needs to be put back in there concerning gender dysphoria.
Is that covered by the penal code? We had some discussion about that if things were covered by the penal code and we're saying that we're going to comply with the penal code. I was thinking that that might be why it was okay to take that out.
Exactly. I think that was the reason.
And
But
I mean, we've even
I don't
had.
see any reason, since it complies with the penal code, not to just have it reiterated in this policy like the board suggested. It's not going to hurt.
I'm not sure I'm following what y'all are saying.
We're discussing the fact that those two bullet points were pulled out.
Right, sure.
And why.
So you're saying it was taken out
Yes.
because of the penal code?
Yes.
Well,
No.
I'm saying that's what I thought was why.
That's what was discussed. The reason that it was already covered, that we didn't need to reiterate it, but it's not going to hurt if we do.
I don't have that same recollection of that discussion.
So what's your recollection?
So my recollection of the discussion at the committee meeting where we met with Ms. Lacy was that those two issues were the ones that were not supported by state law currently. That the inclusion of those would actually be a violation of, and I said state law, of state and federal law that applies to this area. So the concern there and the discussion around that was not whether or not they were within or outside of the penal code. The question and the discussion, as I recall it, was whether or not including those would violate applicable law to these types of
situations. And my understanding from that discussion and discussions with Ms. Lacy was that there was concern that, yes, they would violate law that applies to these situations.
And we did communicate that during the committee meeting.
Correct.
But we were talking about the last executive committee when we met. That was brought up. So is he correct?
That is correct in the conversation.
It does violate,
That it could. That was the conversation that was
may.
had. Yes, and
but do we have an absolute on that?
at this point in time, no, we don't have an absolute on that.
So taking it a
We don't
step,
have an absolute.
Well, I think, but let me say this in Ms. Lacy's defense. I mean, you're asking for a yes or no, black or white answer on a gray area that's subject to interpretation by the judiciary. And Ms. Lacy's opinion, if I'm not mistaken, would be based on her interpretation of case law that may not fall under this exact same fact pattern, but applying her legal knowledge and applying the holdings in those cases to this fact pattern, there's concerns that inclusion of those two bullet points would violate existing case law. And correct me if I've misstated that.
No, that's correct, sir.
Okay.
And I'll, Councilman Young and Councilman Crocker, can you correct me if I'm wrong? And I believe the other part of that conversation was that the larger city council conversation thus far has been the idea of sexually explicit content, and that those two bullet points took a step out of those previous discussions. And so that was an attempt by the committee to stay on that track of making sure that the sexually explicit content was not in the juvenile section of the library.
Correct, that was part of the conversation.
Right, and I think that was the conversation that dealt with what we've heard consistently, at least what I've heard from up here was we were concerned about the content more than we're concerned necessarily about subject matter, and that the other bullet points dealt specifically with content, and now we're moving into subject matter, and that was the concern for whether or not existing legal precedent would apply to that differently than it would to the other bullet points. And my understanding from the discussion was that, yes, it would, because it was subject matter related, not content related, as these other bullet points specifically point to.
So for those two bullet points, could you boil them down together and it say something to the effect, I don't know if this is right, it's off the cuff, content that introduces or promotes negative mental health issues?
Say that again?
So content that introduces or promotes negative mental health issues.
Wouldn't that be subjective to what you consider negative based upon that person? So that's just playing devil's advocate here. That's a...
so I apologize, I brought in the penal code. That wasn't the reasoning before. That's kind of my reasoning right now, is that if that topic is covered by the penal code, then we've already got that in there. I don't know that that topic is. I think, some of the audience brought it up, and I'm looking at this attachment, and apparently it's child abuse. So I'm just brainstorming, which I shouldn't be doing. But the paragraph 2 down where we talk about the penal code, can we resolve this issue by referencing child abuse, or in addition to violations of the penal code, that we also don't want to incorporate child abuse? And I know that's hitting everybody really cold.
Well, it is a point of clarification. The Attorney General opinion that's being referred to is referring to parents who actually have allowed some sort of medical procedure that the actual act of doing that. It doesn't say anything, and it doesn't reference the idea of introducing this to children or providing of information. That Attorney General opinion is about, is it can it be considered child abuse if a parent allows a minor under the age of 18 to have a gender reassignment surgery or take the hormones or, you know, do something that alters essentially their ability to reproduce when they, you know, become an adult? It's not, so that's two different things that you're talking about. It's not considered under the penal code child abuse to allow a child to have a, you know, the information. It's the parent's act of allowing them to actually do something medical that could put that under the penal code.
So my idea won't work.
Correct.
Okay.
It's a physical act.
Yeah, I keep going round and round on this, Mr. De La Garza, just trying to figure out a wording
And I think we can come to some wording to
that
mention
will
those
cover what are in those 2 bullet points.
topics.
I want to make sure that, you know, if it's already covered in it, that's fine, but I can't figure out where it would be covered, except for community standard. It's like you wouldn't have a book in this section that would glorify a serial killer. Right? It's not in the policy, though. But we all kind of know that that's, you know, more of a mental health and it's really problems with that individual. So is that a community standard issue that the same mental health type of issue with gender dysphoria falls under?
I guess the question is, how many books do we have related to this topic?
Or do we even have a problem?
Correct. You know, I did ask the question, are we looking for a solution to a problem that we don't currently have? I know that there's some, I think there's some legislation or some legal stuff. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Lacy. Other communities?
Yes, I mean, other communities are facing this issue, and there is court cases that are going on out there that perhaps could give us some clear directive in the future as to what is or is not, you know, acceptable to include language of these sorts of things, especially in a juvenile section.
In my understanding, because we had that discussion specifically about that, is this a solution looking for a problem? From the standpoint that we asked staff, we said, hey, you know, how many books do we have in the juvenile section or in the library that promote these types of medical procedures that were covered in that bullet point? And my understanding is that we do not have any currently.
In the juvenile section.
In the juvenile section, yes.
Yeah.
But they're in the young adult section, which is now
18 and above.
What was brought up, 12 to 18 years old.
That's the adult section.
12 to 18 years old?
No.
18 and over.
18 plus,
Our
because we went to,
definition of young
we
adult.
changed it.
Oh, so that's our definition.
Yeah.
Okay.
Allison, this policy is going to be reviewed every 2 years, correct? Is that what
That would be a question for the library. I'm not sure how often they review. It's every
I think we're on 3 years cycle.
3 years, 5 years? Every 3 years. 5 years.
I thought it was 3 years.
For
I
the
think we're on a-
policy review?
But we can
or
always.
for book review?
No.
Oh.
Policy
No,
that we're-
the library
I mean, we're-
staff,
we can
library,
look at this
library staff
anytime.
has a master schedule
Well,
on how often they review policies, but obviously that can always be reviewed. So in terms of whether this, if your question is, do we have to wait 2 years to change this policy, the answer is no.
okay.
The element where the 2 years has come in, and that's in question, if you will, is for the reevaluation process,
Okay.
not for the review of the entire policy.
I would think that in order to get this thing going again and moving it forward, that we go ahead and leave it the way it is, and if we have to come back and change it, we can come back and change it, but we've had this item on the council for at least 8 months, people. We need to move forward.
And I think,
Exactly. Go ahead.
from my standpoint, you know, what's important going forward is that, Obviously, we've heard from the community, both sides of this issue, multiple sides of this issue. I think whatever policy we put in place, I think it's important that it's clear for our staff as to what it is. But I also think it's very important that it complies with the law as it currently exists. To do otherwise, I think would we have a responsibility to make sure that we're performing our duties within the law as it applies. If that law changes somewhere down the road, then the law changes and you can go back and
take a
revise
look at
that.
it.
But certainly from my standpoint, I'm uncomfortable with putting in a policy that I know to be, or that I've been told to be by the folks that we rely on to tell us that this violates the existing law. I have a hard time doing that. I think we have a duty to make sure we're within that law. Whether we agree with those points, whether we agree with any sentiment on one side or the other, I think whatever policy we come out with has to be a legal policy.
And right now, with all the different schools and cities that are looking at this kind of policy, there's going to be some change coming up. So, I know we need to take a look at everybody and everything and kind of wait for what's going to happen. But we need something in place.
And just a small correction, Councilman Crocker, I said that it could, I did not say that it.
And I understand that.
Okay.
I understand that. Yes, I understand.
Yeah, it's a court
with that-
interpretation of a case that you've cited to us before. I think that would lead you to believe that those 2 bullet points could be challenged under that court
Could be.
case and used as a precedent.
The Supreme Court case, is that the one you're referring to? Yes, sir.
But there's no president yet sitting there, no presidents?
Precedent in this specific item, no, but
No, but I suspect there will be.
So if the law changes, we can always take it out.
Yes, sir.
Well,
Or you can
add it
We can always add it in.
yeah,
We can put it, we can leave it in, but if the law changes, we can take it out also. Because there's no clear understanding according to our legal counsel.
well, I agree with Ms. Solis that we need to move forward on this. And one thought that I've had that I haven't said out loud, because I have a concern about if we put things in here and then them being challenged, and now we can't enforce our policy. I think we need a provision in here that, that if a part of this policy is struck, that the whole thing is not struck.
that's only applicable to laws, isn't it?
Yeah, I think.
Well, can we put it in here anyway?
Severability clause?
I mean, you can. I don't know that it would be tremendously effective in a policy that's quite simply just a policy. It's, it's going to be the actions of the library that are what we're looking at that are going to be, that are going to be challenged in putting this into place. Whether,
So
Whether that-
basically, we would just change the policy if
Right.
there was a challenge. Okay.
Okay, so hold on that thought, okay? Let's get through the other couple of changes that there were. And I don't know that, so y'all came up with 2 years is the only last real change that the committee came up with, correct?
there, if you go back up to right after the section that y'all were just talking about,
Okay,
there was previously a clause that said currently owned items which fall into the category will be shelved in the adult section of the library and are still available for checkout to the general public. That was struck by the committee.
oh, that's, okay, didn't show that, let's see.
But we moved that, correct? Because it was already, wasn't it in a better place?
It's said differently, but basically said in a different section,
Okay,
which is
I
what,
just-
in the section placement below, where it has the clause at or the sentence at the bottom that says the library is responsible for locating its resources, cognitive age, and content appropriateness. The discussion was that that sentence encapsulated the idea of what the previous sentence was trying to accomplish, and since it was already in the policy, to leave that one and strike the one above.
And that comports to my recollection as well. And one thing I know we talked about at the time, and to keep in mind is, we're drafting this policy based on what we know the current circumstances to be, because this issue is one that's in front of us. This policy will be in effect for multiple years. And so you're drafting it not only from the standpoint of using as a guideline for purchase of other books and more resources for the library, which was what it was intended for initially, but also the dual purpose of placement within the library, of where things are going in the library. It's an ongoing policy, which means if this policy doesn't get revised 5 years down the road, 6 years down the road, you want it to apply to the situation as it exists, as it's being applied. And I know that it's not very eloquent, but it may be applied in the future in a context other than the context we're adopting it right now because of the current issues that we're facing. And so you're trying to draft it as a policy that would be a broad policy to apply in any circumstance, not necessarily just a policy that's for right now today. And so I think, at least what I gathered from our discussions in the committee, was that sentence that was taken out was repetitive of, at least of the concept that the library is responsible for locating the resources remaining.
Whether new or existing.
Whether new or existing, that's exactly right. So we want to make it clear that this policy applies not only now, but also in the future.
Yep.
That's a long-winded explanation that probably provided no real benefit to anyone.
No, because that
Lawyerly
question got
answer.
brought up by public, and I knew that was addressed, but it was addressed in a different form and in a better, we felt like placement for section placement.
Yes.
And the last change at the bottom was the addition of the city council having final consideration on the recommendations of the books that are being approved.
So it all said last time.
Yes,
we
sir.
wanted.
Yes.
And then the removal or retention, 2 years, not 1 year.
So that was originally 3 years, it went down to 1 year, and then it was settled on 2 years at this point.
Okay, everybody.
Can I get some clarification on that?
Yes.
So someone challenges a book today, so it cannot be challenged again for two years.
Correct.
Based off of the decision timeframe. So as an example, the books that went through the reevaluation process that the Library Advisory Board decided to support the library director's position, that decision was made in December of 21. So if it's 2 years, those books wouldn't be able to be reevaluated until December of 23.
Okay. So I guess,
So it's based off of when the final decision is made.
so during the public comments, that was correct. It didn't matter if they got 50 complaints within those 2 years, that we still have to wait the 2-year time limit.
To go through their formal reevaluation process.
I'd like to recommend 1 year, go back to 1 year.
Okay, let's do this. Why don't we make a motion to, if someone would, to bring in the committee's recommended form. And then from that, let's make any amendments to it.
Before we do that, one other question. There's been a lot of discussion about explicit. I've gotten a lot of emails about explicit. Could the committee give us some input on why you added that?
Well, I think you probably had the better explanation in the legalese. That's why I'm looking at
So
you.
the discussion at the time, as I recall it, was that the way it was drafted without explicit was that it referred to images, illustrations, representations, written descriptions of sexual conduct. And that was it. It didn't have any modifier or any adjective there. What was discussed was, let's say that you had a book that mentions one of these things in passing, but it's not necessarily descriptive of a specific act, but it just mentions that an act occurs, that's really not what the focus has been from up here in terms of the content in the graphic pictures that we saw, the explicit descriptions of sexual acts and things of that nature. And so the thought process behind putting explicit in there was that got to the heart of what most of the complaints have been, and most of the issues and the concerns have been, which was the graphic nature, the detailed images, the detailed descriptions, versus just a passing reference that could be contained in a book. And so it was more targeting the specific things that have been the subject of the complaints. And explicit seemed to do that.
So is explicit, in your opinion, subjective or objective?
Well, I think explicit is no more objective than many of the things in here, or no more subjective than many of the things in here. I mean, certainly that's a discussion we can have about whether or not what one person may think is explicit versus another person may differ.
So it's been brought to our attention that's subjective, not objective. So putting a different word in there like descriptive, would that be better?
Instead of explicit, you put descriptive?
Yes.
Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes.
Certainly, we can all consider that.
I'm fine with explicit. I think we're mincing words here. I think explicit covers it. Whatever you put, if you put significant, it's still a judgment call. Either word. I think we should move on and.
So, again, it's my suggestion that we make a motion to substitute it in the committee's version, and then entertain any motions to amend it. All right.
I'd like to amend it too.
That's fine.
Well, let's put it in first.
I move that we substitute the revised version.
You have a second? I'll second it. Okay, I have a question before we begin, because we're up for discussion, right?
Yes.
I'm still going back to the first time that we started talking when Jan, opened up the motion. We still have to go backwards to that one?
Well,
Still?
if we do this, we will have, it's really amending or substituting this version for the one that we had put on the table.
Okay.
So this will now be the one on the table.
Uh-huh.
It
So-
will be the amended motion.
Do we have to vote on that before?
That's what we're discussing right
Yeah,
now,
yeah,
this
so
one.
we're going to vote on that, but what I'm asking is, do we have to go back to your motion?
Right, that's why I'm
This will
trying
be
to
a
say.
motion to amend the original motion by substituting
The answer is yes, Josephine.
this.
So we
Okay,
have to
that-
vote
okay,
yes.
that's all I
Yes.
wanted
We
to
got to
know.
vote twice right now.
Yes, okay,
And then any other amendments, we're going to have to vote
Yes.
on before we
Okay.
get back to the original one.
okay, that's,
If this passes, the substituted version,
So we vote to put this one on the table and then discuss
as
it.
opposed to the other one.
uh-huh, and then we, then
We
amend
can
it.
amend it. So this is a motion that's on the floor to amend the original motion by Ms. Scott to substitute the committee's version for the one we had at the last meeting. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on that item? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
All right, you got 6-1. Now we have the committee's version on the table.
I would like to propose that we adopt the committee's version because we can't do an amendments until
I can't hear you.
until it's on the, well, is it on the floor now?
Yeah.
You can make your
I would
amendments.
like to make an amendment to, and
To the
I'll pass
committee's-
out what I'd like to do. If you guys would look at page 3. And if you look at selection placement, the topic above it talks about the penal code. And I would like to insert the following after it talks about when determining whether to include such material, whether printed or otherwise in the library's juvenile collection. I would like to add, the Victoria Public Library strives to maintain an inclusive environment in which all citizens are welcome, excluding books from the library collection based on race, color, religion, sex, including pregnancy, sexual orientation or gender identity, national origin, disability, or age will not be tolerated. I need a second.
You want that behind the penal code?
I want it after the penal code.
Before
Section placement.
Okay,
Mark, you might have to speak more into the mic in general.
Thank you. You want me to repeat it?
Sure.
VPL stresses to maintain an inclusive environment in which all citizens are welcome, excluding books from the library's collection based on race, color, religion, sex, including pregnancy, sexual orientation, or gender identity, national origin, disability, or age will not be tolerated.
So we have a motion, do we have a second?
I have a question before we do that,
Well,
and that's for Ellison.
wait. We have a motion being made.
Oh,
It has to be seconded before it can be discussed.
So do we have a second on adding this verbiage to that?
yes, I'll do a second.
Okay, got a second.
Okay, I have a question, Allison.
Yes, ma'am.
The verbiage he wants to include, is that anywhere in that Texas Penal Code 43.24 or the City Code Section 15-5?
Is that language in either of those code sections?
Yes.
Or is it covered by the First Amendment of the United States Constitution?
Yes.
Okay.
No, it is not in our.
So if we're not going to go along those lines, it's already covered by the First Amendment. I would argue, and I would vote against the amendment and including it because it's already covered
Would
by
argue
it.
against it also.
Yeah.
Already part of it. It's understood, I would.
Yeah.
All right, all those in favor of amending? Yes, sir?
It may be understood.
Mark.
And it may be understood, and so is sexual content is understood. I think it should be placed in there. I really think it's important to the whole community that be in the policy. That's why I bring it up.
It seems to me if it's anywhere, it should be in the adult and young adult section.
It should be there too.
Well, but I don't think we even have a placement thing there because I don't think we have that issue there.
But there's a place we can stick it in there too. I believe it should be in both policies.
Oh, there is a placement.
I remember the mayor talking at the library advisory board meeting, and he made it explicitly clear that we did not want to discriminate against certain people, and that it was all about sexual content. This states that we do not want to discriminate against certain people, and I think it should be in the policy. And I
But I think that's
understand it,
what-
I understand it's
I
covered
think
by.
that's what the policy is doing. That's why we went to all these lengths and efforts and have had all these conversations to make sure that we didn't have that in there. That we weren't doing any discrimination, we weren't going against the First Amendment. And yes, I've been very clear on that, but I think we've gotten a policy now that meets that.
Why can't we state this? You say it's redundant, but I don't see it stated in there. It just talks about what we can't do in the library. Or, you know, I understand. Let's we
Okay.
agree to disagree.
Yes, sir.
And just a couple of points that I'll make from the standpoint that you say that excluding books based on race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or age, of what? Of the subject matter, of the author?
Based on age.
And I guess my question is books don't have any of those, so what are you applying those specific metrics to? And the other thing that would concern me is that if you say that we're not going to exclude books based on sex, then that's exactly what we've done here, because all of these things talk about sex. Because the way sex is in here, it's not clear whether or not you're talking about male, female, otherwise, or you're talking about a physical act. And so I think this would create all kinds of issues by including it, and I think, agree that it's already covered under the First Amendment.
All right.
I disagree.
We'll call the vote. All those in favor of including Mr. Lofgren's amended language into the committee's policy, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay?
Nay.
All right. All right, Mr. De La Garza, you had some
I
suggested.
was wanting to amend that where it says explicit, to be a descriptive to be more objective instead of subjective.
Okay, so I keep looking at the wrong one.
It's on page 2
Yep.
at the bottom.
So your motion is to amend by replacing explicit with,
Descriptive. To be, again, to attempt to bring it to more objective than subjective.
Thank you.
Pardon me, Mr. De Garza. What did you ask? What was did you give a word?
Descriptive? Descriptive?
Descriptive.
Yes, sir.
So descriptive written descriptions.
Was this seconded?
oh,
Wasn't.
Not yet.
Then we can't discuss it till it's seconded.
Right.
I'll second it, but I only want to hear the argument because I don't know that the word descriptive is any better, just looking at straight definitions.
I mean, I'm looking at other language that we could potentially use, and I'm looking at explicit, stated clearly and in detail, leaving no room for confusion or doubt. Clear, direct, plain, or obvious. Straightforward, clear cut, precise, exact, definite. I mean,
And the problem I have with going to that extreme is now you're basically really only talking about an actual photographic type of a description as opposed to an illustration. When you're talking about clear, direct, I mean,
It's covered in there.
you're almost at the point where you're saying it's either
Yeah.
all out there it is for real in a human being, or it doesn't meet the description. And I don't want to go that far.
But it says images, illustrations, representations. It does follow up.
Say that again, sorry.
After the word explicit, which we want to substitute a different word, you said it didn't describe the images, illustrations, or representations. But I think it does, brings it more to the objective side than the subjective than it is now, as stated earlier.
All right. Any further comments, language lessons?
I'm just struggling how an adjective is subjective or objective, you know?
So all those in favor of changing or amending to strike explicit and put in descriptive, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Nay.
Okay.
Nay.
All right.
Okay. And then amend the 2-year review to 1 year. That's my recommendation.
Okay, second.
Okay.
I'm not clear what we're doing.
The book review period is 2 years.
Library Advisory Board decisions on removal or retention will be upheld for 1 year instead of 2 years is the motion, and the second on the floor is next to the last bullet point on page 5.
Would you go 18 months? I mean, that's going to take up the library staff's time and
No, we don't have that many books, whether that have that type of content. That was stated earlier. They're very minuscule, so it's not going to take up the staff's time.
And theoretically, after we go through this another time with the new policy, we may not have that many books in the future. We can go back to 2 years.
Exactly, 1 year. So that's my recommendation.
Question in regards to the books that were just recently looked at in the decisions. What was the year, time, or?
21, December 21.
So they're all
No,
they're all
but what
available
was
now.
the existing chance to come back 3 years?
Previously.
Are they grandfathered in based upon the previous?
I think because it's
just-
a new policy, we can do whatever we want with it.
I just didn't know how that worked with, they were done under a certain,
It was our intent, Councilman Young, that if this policy was adopted, that the books that are currently on, let's say, standby from the last, from December of '21 would be, they would fall under the new policy, and that amount of years would reflect the same.
okay, thank you.
Were there some others that were challenged in '22?
I think there were,
Couple last summer, I believe,
I think there were, I'm not sure.
just a couple.
Okay.
I think so, and I think there's one, yeah, there's one pending.
Okay. All right, any further discussion on Mr. De La Garza's motion to go from 2 years to 1 for the retention period or the re-review period?
I don't think we got a second.
I
I
did.
don't think you did.
Oh, you did?
Seconded.
Oh, okay.
The mayor did.
The mayor did.
All right, all those in favor of amending as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay?
Nay.
I think nay's got that one. All right. So now we have a unamended
Yes.
policy in front of us. Does anybody else want to make any further amendments? I will say I would like to continue working with you, Mr. De La Garza. Those last 2 bullet points,
Yes.
I really want to comb through those with a fine tooth comb,
That's
see if
fine.
there's something we can do. We are always free, any one of us, always welcome to bring something back if you want to change or amend this policy in the future.
Well, and Mr. Mayor, I looked, the last bullet point in regards to medical, anything in regards to medical, whether it's surgeries or whatever like this, yeah, obviously you've got to be of the age of 18 to consent from a medical procedure. And so I struggled with, does every book that alludes to any kind of medical procedure belong in the adult section anyway? There are unintended consequences with this when you have a book about having a wisdom teeth removed or going to the dentist, which we talked about, and all of a sudden that is could be a medical procedure, and it would be removed when it should be in a certain section. So there's unintended consequences of everything, and I understand.
Yep. No, thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I'd like to ask a question, and this is, I guess, for staff and perhaps Ms. Lacy. So, and this goes to the point that Ms. Zeller brought up during the comments. So if juvenile and young adult are defined a certain way by the American Library Association, and we define them differently in our policies, how is that going to impact the placement? Because as I understand, the concern that was made was that this policy, because it says juvenile, it says recommended ages 17 and below, but that there's still books that are defined as young adult by the American Library Association that would be placed in areas that would be accessible to juveniles, unless I'm missing the point of, that was made.
So-
So I'm just trying to get some clarification.
Sure.
What I don't want to do is by
Yeah,
changing
so,
that age, we just,
Right, so a couple of points, right? So you may or may not recall, I'm not sure to what extent that part of the conversation made it to council, but there were references in the policy to the American Library Association, right? And the Library Advisory Board, as well as some council members, said, we don't want to follow necessarily the guidance from the American Library Association, right? So we took out some verbiage in the policy, right? And we started down this path of, well, rather than simply just adhering to American Library Association policies and guidelines, Let's focus on maybe trying to create our own, right? And so from that stemmed this idea, and that's when ideas started sort of circulating and through brainstorm, conversation among staff and even with some of you around, well, rather than just falling back on these traditional, definitions like the one that was expressed tonight on young adult, what if we just went about it in a different way? And so then we landed on creating this age for young adult that would go from 18 to 25. And because we know that, some people might, find that to be different than what we've done in the past, we thought, well, in order to be very clear, let's put some signage, at the end of the shelves, which we're gonna do regardless, by the way, because that's an operational decision, to highlight, what those ages mean. And Jessica actually today forwarded me what those signs would look like. So that would literally say, young adult, 18 to 25, right? So that as folks approach those sections, we're being as transparent and upfront as we can around what the intended audience ought to be. I don't think anybody's gonna challenge us and say, hey, you're defining young adult different than the American Library Association, or if somebody does bring that to light, we can simply say, well, it's our library, and we simply decided to do it that way because that's what made sense for us, right? And ultimately, that's what we're trying to achieve with these policy changes, right? We're trying to develop a policy that we think makes more sense for us, for what we want to be a priority, not necessarily subscribe to American Library Association. So that's how we landed with where we did.
Okay, so is the impact of this then going to be that the juvenile section is expanded to include young adult? Or that the young adult section gets moved in with the adult collection?
Currently, young adult books, and Jessica can correct me if I'm wrong, are sectioned with the adult books.
Okay.
So that is on the right, if you're right-hand side of the library. So that whole section would be covered by the young adult policy. And then the section to the left, where it's the juvenile section, would be covered by the policy that y'all are talking about right now. And I think if you look down, and just to kind of further answer that question, under the section placement section, we had added language that says in the first sentence, VPL recognizes that a publisher or reviewer's determination of juvenile reading level may include subject matter not suitable for juvenile collection or VPL's community of users, and will use professional judgment when determining placement of juvenile books in the designated juvenile section of the library. I think that kind of addresses your concern of, that was our way of making it clear that just because the ALA says that it goes in, this section or that section doesn't necessarily mean we're going to use our community standards and our professional judgment to determine whether that's right for our library. And that's what that was intended to do.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just wondering, I know the title doesn't really matter, but we could change the title to juvenile parentheses, babies, children, teenagers, close parentheses. And then anybody asking for our policies, the word juvenile is now defined differently than everywhere else, and then we would just put that in the title.
It says recommended ages 17 and below.
It does, but it also says juvenile, and if somebody's going to make the argument, like I said, I know the title doesn't really matter, but I don't know if that gives anybody a better level of comfort. Apparently not.
Or you could also strike the word juvenile out and just recommend it 17 and below.
All right, so
Okay.
we have a policy on the table, motion and a second. Unamended from the committee. Thank you to the three committee members. Thank you, Ms. Lacy. Thank you, Jessica. And with that, I'll call for the vote.
Mr. Mayor, I thank the public for coming out and speaking, reaching out. It's been educational. I think that this policy that has been drafted and to be voted on strengthens our library. I think it does make our library safer for the youth, and that was a huge topic up here. I feel good about what we're about to vote on. I think I think excellent work was done. I think we listened, and we've come up with a heck of a lot better policy.
Yeah,
With,
and I would
the help
echo
of
that.
all.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I would echo that and agree, and, you know, I think the Library Advisory Board obviously
Yes.
put a lot of time into this, put a lot of effort into this. This wasn't something that just, you know, fell out of the sky. Obviously, there was work done on this. I want to thank them for their involvement, for their putting in the effort and coming up with a policy that would make our library better. And I think this policy, even as amended, I think goes a long way to make our library better and make our community better. And I thank everyone for all the effort that's been put on it and all the time that's been spent on it, because I know it's been considerable.
Well said, Mr. Crocker.
Exactly. Ditto.
All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Great. And then we have an adult and young adult collection development policy. We have no motions on the table for it.
I move we adopt the policy as presented tonight.
Thank you.
By the committee, to be more specific.
Yeah, the one prepared by the committee.
I second it.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The motion carries. Item E2.
Item E2 is a resolution to support and pursue the joint sponsorship of the Victoria Regional Airport.
All right, so good news. Chick-fil-A will be waiting for executive session. And second, I'm very excited to introduce a couple of folks that are here with Stephen Baldwin and Associates. They're here to make a presentation on a recommendation for airport governance study that began last year. This was a study and a conversation that really initiated with the Big Five. You may recall the Big Five, including the port, the city, the county, South Tax Development Corporation, and the airport. And through those conversations with the Big Five, which of course began a couple years ago under the leadership of Mayor McCoy, it didn't take very long to get to a conversation around the importance of the airport in our community. And through the course of several months of conversation amongst the different leaders in our community, the county ended up contracting with Stephen Baldwin and Associates in order for them to come in and conduct the study. This study, as you hear about, was very comprehensive, included an economic impact study and a recommendation that on a change on that governance that you hear about tonight. With us tonight is Stephen Baldwin himself, who is the president and CEO of the company, as well as Spencer Gillette, who's going to spearhead tonight's conversation. So I want to ask Spencer to come up to the podium and take it from here.
Thank you, Jesus and Mayor, and it's good to be here with you today, with all you council members. So as Jesus mentioned, we started this governance review last year, and so about a series of 7 months or so. And today we're here to discuss what that review entailed and the findings therefore and the recommendations, as well as some next steps. So as you all might know, the Victoria Regional Airport is sponsored by Victoria County. Sponsorship is a FAA term related to grant assurances, but they're the owners and operators of the airport. And about a year ago, and from 1952 to the end of last year, that is, they had a Victoria Airport Commission that was overseeing the operation of the airport on behalf of the county. And that commission was set to expire, and it did expire. And we were brought in to look at that model as well as alternative models within the state of Texas. To do so, we formed an Airport Governance Advisory Committee with the county that was made up of members from the Big Five. And today I'd like just to take a moment to thank those members for their service on the committee, including the mayor and Jesus, Buddy Billups, and I don't see any others here in the room today, but I would like to thank them all for their time going through this process with us. So here's a list of the meetings that took place for the committee and the topics that were discussed. We started off with looking at the current governance model underneath the county, then reviewing the state legislation in Texas, And from there, pretty in-depth financial analysis, looking at where the financial position of the airport is, some of the capital funding that is coming up, and we'll talk about that a little later on here, and the economic impact, and we'll have those results to present as well. So here you'll see the governance models that were reviewed by the committee as well as our firm. That included the airport commission, the county sponsorship, so direct county sponsorship that is, joint sponsorship, an airport authority sponsorship, direct city or municipal sponsorship, as well as the university sponsorship. The other forms, that includes like the Port Authority was also looked at. So what we found looking at these models, many are available within your state, and a couple would require state legislation. Those ones include the Airport Authority sponsorship, university sponsorship, and any other forms as well would require state legislation. Others that are available in your state include the Airport Commission, county sponsorship, joint sponsorship, and direct city sponsorship or other municipal sponsorship. So Grand Valley State University was a subcontractor of ours, and they helped us perform this economic impact study. And the findings found that the Victoria Regional Airport contributes about $45 million in total economic output to your regional community here, and 171 jobs, 11.4 million in total earnings, and then 3.7 million in that tax impact as well. So these are pretty significant numbers here, and you can really see the impact and the money that is coming into your community through the airport. And so it's a great thing to see, and we hope that continues to go upward. Here's a little breakdown for you of the percentage difference between the county and the city. These were derived from the total economic impact numbers of that 44.7 and broke that down further. So you'll see about 31 million towards the county and 13.5 can be attributed towards the city overall. We didn't get or present here to you today the detailed financial findings, but you can find those more in the report that was provided to you. But these are the 2021 overall financial findings for you, where the airport received $2.66 million in revenue, $2.53 million in expenses, which comes out to $132 in the net operating income. So that's just marginally positive there. Great to be positive, but not very high in the green there. So good position for the airport to be in, and hopefully it can continue to increase that net income position. The capital program here, you'll see, is almost a $40 million total capital program over the next 5 years. That's going to include improvements to the terminal buildings, the airfield, as well as the ARF. ARF, sorry, thank you. ARF is aircraft rescue and firefighting. So that could, and Lenny could share more, but that could be attributed towards our facilities as well as our vehicles when you look at improvements there. The airport today is currently eligible for the lower share amount at that 5% share, that 1.9 million. It's typical of airports across the country to pay a 10% local match to grant funding. But due to the qualifications that your airport currently qualifies for, you're at that 5%. But we wanted to show that larger range for you as well. So following all this research and analysis that we performed, which again, you'll find more in detail in the report itself, we met with various stakeholders, including members of that Big Five group, and here are a few points that we learned from them. So the stakeholders preferred a model that gives the airport greater autonomy in terms of management and operation. Stakeholders also wish for increased partnerships to promote the development and operation of the airport. And it was also frequently discussed how to fund special projects at the airport. So when the airport is looking to help with that terminal project or expand in the development and the area and the facilities needed to operate the airport, then those things could use those partnerships to help kick those off. So when ranked against alternative models that were discussed earlier, so all of those models, the group as a whole, the majority was preferable towards a modified airport commission model. So taking in all this into consideration, we came forward with our recommendation, and that is to form a joint sponsorship between the county and the city for the operation of the airport. Here in the second bullet point, you'll find the Texas Transportation Code specific to the law that allows that to take place for joint operation. So why did we choose that? We feel that it establishes regional representation focused solely on the airport and can be dedicated to that airport and its needs. It also provides opportunities for additional funding to promote the airport and regional economic growth. Legislative foundation to facilitate the partnership, so it's already existing. You do not need to go forward to amend state legislation. And it also provides the most potential for success in achieving airport strategic initiatives. We want to talk a little today about how we envision this joint sponsorship model. You'll find this in the report, and these are all just talking points to discuss amongst the county and the city, but we wanted to give you what we envision it to look like based upon our work and across the country. So there would be a defined level of autonomy with some checks and balances. That would include clear powers of authority to the Joint Commission. An airport to be operated as self-sufficient as possible. So financially, they would be set to continue to operate the airport and try to do so to make it self-sufficient and does not require taxpayer dollars. So we're trying to help ensure that this commission has that goal within these agreements. The county continues to serve as the administrative arm of the airport, so the county and its employees would likely remain county employees during the transition to this new model, and that could be done through a services agreement between the commission and the county. And under the commission's policies and procedures, most business can be conducting directly at the airport. The commission would form an annual budget for special projects that would be subject to the approval of the county and the city both. And then buying and selling of land would also require sponsor approval, and so would eminent domain. The board members of a joint airport commission would be appointed by both the county and the city. The specific terms of which and of the agreement and what the commission would look like would be developed using a steering committee with the representatives of the county and the city and the airport working together to come up with those terms. And the joint sponsorship would also require the approval then after those terms are developed by both the county and the city, and then again by the FAA, which will help facilitate if the county and the city both decide to move forward with this
Quick
recommendation.
question, I apologize if this was in the report. The board members with the appointed by city and county, is that the way our library policy board is? Some are appointed by the city, some by the county. Would it be the same? Is that what you're describing? Or are you describing that the city and the county would be in 100% agreement on who was going to be appointed?
I would defer to Jesus, as I'm not familiar with the library board.
It just jumped in. I'm sorry.
You had to bring that back up.
Yeah, the appraisal review board.
No, it would be that we would have a certain number that we would appoint, the county would have a
Okay.
certain number we would appoint.
Thank you, and it wasn't
And it
that
wasn't
important, but it was bugging me.
Joint nomination.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the steering committee that we're recommending would come forward with a recommendation to both the county and the city with what that board membership would look like. And then you would have a chance to approve that or deny it. And with that, so the next step, so upon the recommendation by the county and the city to move forward via resolution, we would then form through an appointment of the county and the city, each with the 3 appointments to a steering committee that would then work with us as well as staff to help develop what those terms are going to look like. And we would come back and present those terms in a draft agreement to both the county and the city. And we are anticipating about a 3 to 6 month schedule for that, giving us a target date of July 1. During that time period, there would need to be some consultation with the FAA as well, which we've done in the past and have a good process with the FAA. And we would work with them to get their approval as well regarding the change of sponsorship. So adding an additional sponsor, in this case being the city. And then from there, we've also requested that the county put forward an advisory-only airport commission to serve until the new model is implemented. That would help for some continuation from where they left off at the end of the year to when the new governing model is established.
Can I ask a question about FAA approval? So assuming that the city and county can come to some type of agreement, is there reasons, or what would reasons be based on y'all's experience that the FAA wouldn't approve this type of model? I mean, is there certain triggers or certain criteria that have to be met? Do they typically just default and approve what's done, or is there a likelihood that, or a possibility that they wouldn't approve it?
We don't envision that they would deny the request, but we have worked on these a number of times across the country and have a format, an understanding of what the FAA is looking for regarding this. So we'll help steer you in the right direction in that. There are some things that if the agreements are written in place to be in violation of federal grant assurances, that would be a red flag.
Okay.
So we'll help to ensure that that does not take place and are not within those agreements. Historically, airports have many of those. Diversion of revenue is a good example of that, which the FAA looks to prevent. So we will ensure that those factors in coordination with the FAA are accounted for.
What airports in Texas presently have a joint city-county agreement?
We're not aware of any within Texas.
Really?
Really. Now, it's really common across the country for different municipalities, whether it's 2 counties or a city-county or multiple cities that work together in the oversight of an airport. We do see that. And that's typically done through what we call an airport commission.
Is anybody changing their models to go from some model to county-only owned and sponsored?
We have not seen that in the recent history of transactions between changes of sponsorship.
Okay.
Which is the most prevalent model that is used in Texas?
Generally, it would be a municipal model, whether it's a city or a county. There are not airport authorities that are commercial airports, like a Federal Aviation Part 139 airport. We're not aware of any airport authorities, but that is a trend that we see across the country. But your state legislation does not have that open and available to your community, so that would require to go out and seek that legislation. But that's a trend across the country. What we're recommending today with a joint sponsorship is very close to an airport authority, but the sponsorship would remain between the county and the city both, and not under the airport commission directly in this case.
And to answer your question, Josephine, I mean, what is very common, at least in my experience, is for airports to be under cities. So like San Antonio, for example, runs the airport. Corpus Christi runs the airport. Brownsville, my hometown, runs the airport. So Texas is very common, you know, for cities to be involved. I think where Lenny was before, I think the city, yeah, it was city run as well.
Sponsored and with airport commission running it?
Yeah. Yeah. But the city as the lead, I guess, is the point, right? Yeah.
So what we see predominantly in the country and over the last 20 years is mostly moving to airport authorities. Texas legislation does not allow you to have an airport authority unless you were to go to the state legislature and lobby them for new legislation to create an airport authority. That goes back to the establishment of Dallas-Fort Worth, Love Field agreements. It was very intricate in Texas when those governmental bodies were established. And for whatever reason, the state did not leave available on its books the ability for a municipality to create an authority. So the next best thing you have would be a commission, whether that commission is a single or joint sponsored bodyship. So it's a little unique in Texas, like a lot of things.
Thank you.
When you look at page 7 of the report, I noticed that most of the governance in Texas is city.
All right, was that
That was it.
your last slide?
Yeah, that was the last slide. So I'd like to just thank you all again.
All right, appreciate it, Spencer. So before us tonight, there is a resolution for us to support and pursue this joint sponsorship agreement. Surprising this morning, the county chose to table theirs. I guess it turned into this afternoon, chose to table theirs till next week. I don't know that it's prudent to go forward with anything tonight.
Yeah, and I know that at the end of the day, the devil's in the details, as they say, that there's going to be other discussions about, the specifics that are involved in that. But, these were mirror resolutions, as I understand it. I mean,
Pretty close.
Pretty close, virtually identical. And I guess from my standpoint, if they've tabled theirs and there's going to be some revision, I'd like to know what that is before we vote on a resolution on the same topic and same issue.
Well, that would make sense.
And so I'll make a motion that we table this item
Second.
until the next meeting.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to table this. Any further discussion? I do want to say, personally, and in capacity as this mayor for the city, I'm in favor of pursuing this. I think it is imperative for our community that we have positive changes at the airport. It is imperative to our economic development future. And the airport is in desperate need of some capital infusion. I think we have some great ways that we can help them. And as you see, to get 39.6 million, it's about $2 million that we're gonna have to match, but that would be split with the county. And that's over a 5-year period. We're talking $200,000 a year over a 5-year period. So I think it's very important that we do consider this when it comes back up, depending on what that resolution takes the shape of. But it's something I really personally want to pursue.
And I would say too, to Stephen Baldwin and Associates, I want to thank you guys for a very thorough report. And I know that a lot of time and effort went into that, but it was very clear on the issues and questions that we had. I appreciate the work you put in on it.
Yep. Yeah, you couldn't ask for a better expert firm to do this analysis for us and really, really thorough report. Okay, all those in favor of tabling this until next week's, or 2 weeks, I'm sorry, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign, carries, and actually, it's gonna be 3 weeks.
I think our next meeting is.
For a
in 3
five Tuesday
That was
month.
my only thought, is if they approve it next week,
Yeah,
that
we
were to
got,
hold up.
it's all right.
Could always call a special meeting if you want
We
it.
could.
Yeah.
They're holding us up.
All right, we don't have, oh wait, we have city manager reports, forgot about those two.
Yeah,
Excited.
it's okay.
Sorry,
We'll
Ms.
go as
Williams.
quickly as possible. Danielle will spearhead the first one, just bringing back up the entertainment district and sound ordinance. Thank y'all.
So I wanted to bring this back to you in regard to the sound ordinance and what we proposed in the original entertainment district. For tonight, really just seeking your direction on the two ordinances and how they read. So we'll go over the existing ordinance, further explain the proposed sound ordinance as it pertains to the entertainment district, review the discrepancies, and then also review some more updated sound measurements. The previous ones were taken in May, and we also have some that were recently taken last week. So currently, the sound ordinance for the city as a whole is based off of where the sound is received, and it's set at 60 decibels, and there are certain times of days that it is allowable, and then also there is a 50 decibel reading. Then you have non-residential properties where the complaint originates or at the property at 60 decibels as well. So that's where it is today. The entertainment district proposes that it be at 90 decibels at the place of origin or where the sound of mixing. And it also coincides with the hours of their business hours and their TABC license with a bar or an entertainment nightlife business. So that's the gist of the two that we have now. As you can tell, the discrepancies right now for the entertainment district is 90 decibels at the point of sound mixing versus the 60 or 50 decibels where the complaint originates. Neither ordinance addresses the vibrations felt by a subwoofer, which I think is key to note here. We also do not have a way to measure vibrations when it comes to enforcement, other than physically feeling it. Enforcement of the current ordinance, the sound measurement is taken from where the complaint originates, proposes where the sound measurement is taken at the point of where the sound is mixing. There is no delineation between outdoor amplified sound versus indoor amplified sound. I wanted to point that out as well because, as you know, if you have outdoor sound, it's going to be louder, it's going to carry, the wind could even carry it in different directions, and it could impose on other places of residence or businesses. Versus indoor, it's kind of contained and can be handled better, if you will. And then lastly, the times allowed amplified sound vary based on the TABC license and hours of operation versus designated times and days in the current ordinance. Quick review of what the two are in difference. So as from the last time, I remember y'all asking me to bring a graphic that kind of shows and breaks it down what is 90 decibels. And on this graph provided by the Hearing Health Foundation, 90 decibels is roughly me using a hairdryer in the morning. All of these measurements are taken by where the sound originates. So you can also see that on average, nightclubs and bars operate at 105 or 110 decibels. Rock or pop concerts further down on the grid operate at 110 to 120 decibels. So again, keep in mind the proposed entertainment district would only ask businesses to keep sound levels at 90 decibels at the point of sound mixing. So the most recent tests that were provided by Chief Jamison, thank you, those were taking at Greeks 205 in downtown, which is within the entertainment district, and also at Bird Dogs off of Airline in Laurent. There was only one time that the measurement exceeded 90 decibels at the point of sound mixing at Greeks. As you can see, all the other times they were within the 90 decibels or within the 60 to 50 range, based on where the readings were taken at. So source of reading is where the point of sound mixing is on this table, and then reading the decibels is actually where you would possibly receive a complaint at those street locations. Then on January 14th, another reading was taken. Greeks didn't have a band or live music entertainment, but Bird Dogs did, and as you can see, the measurements are there below. So the conclusion that I have is both locations were within compliance with proposed entertainment district sound ordinances and current sound ordinance. Based off of the 22 annual data provided by the police department, the total number of loud music calls in 22 were over 700 calls, with most of these complaints coming from music within a residence, somebody in their home playing loud music or sound, or from a vehicle passing by or nearby. 83 of those complaints came from bars with indoor and or outdoor entertainment. Bird dogs fell at 39 calls for the last year. Decibel readings were taken 5 times with 1 citation issued. 34 of those times, management was advised of the complaint. Then you have Dodge City at 28, Greeks 205 at only 6 calls, Breezy's Bar at 4 calls, The Goat, which is now closed, at 3, Forum Club 1, Maximus 1, and Ricardo's at 1. It's important to note that only Bird Dogs, Breezy's, and Greeks 205 are the only outside venues where they play outdoor music. No other enforcement action was taken at the other establishments due to the businesses adhering to the complaint. So they took action once it was addressed.
Would you back up a slide?
Yes, ma'am.
Please? The readings in decibels at the Firestone parking lot are above 60 twice. Was it the time of day? Because you said that none of these readings were in violation of the proposed or the existing ordinance, and the existing ordinance is 60. Well,
No, but the
but
existing
in-
ordinance is 60 at the location that the sound is received.
But that
Right.
And so-
Firestone is actually also the, that would be a business
That's a business.
versus residence.
That's the only reason that that's not in violation, because it's a business, okay.
And it wasn't a complaint.
If you go back one more,
Council, there were actually 7 of all the readings that we took, there were 7 times that they were over 60. And you're seeing that. So there were 7 times. Sorry.
if you go back one other one.
Sure.
Oop, there you go. So here,
Greeks.
I'm looking at bird dogs. They go over quite often, even in residential. But looking at the source readings from the same night, they don't even approximate 90.
Right.
But I know we're getting complaints at 60 in residences. So is 90 the right number at the source? Or should?
If
should
I
it be
might
different?
address that, when you're talking about bird dogs specifically, it is not the decibel reading that we're having the problem with. It is the vibration. That's one of the reasons that we need to have that added back into our ordinance. It was there once before and we took it out, I think back in 2016, if I'm not mistaken. And we need to put that back in because, and I'll just refer to Mr. Eller, he lives at 1205. You guys might be familiar with him.
Yes.
I stood Wednesday night in his living room, his television was on, took a reading. The level was below the 60, but the vibration was rattling his windows. So we need to, that's what's bugging them. And so we need to probably address that if we can.
And if I may, we're not trying to recommend that the 90 decibels be outside of the entertainment district. I would like to see that the 90 decibels be within the entertainment district and possibly the current ordinance remain the same with the addition of the vibrations for the outside of the entertainment district. But this could go many ways. And so really just seeking your guidance on which direction you would like this to go.
Well, my concern is the 90 decibels in the, down in the entertainment district. We're trying to have downtown be mixed use. We're trying to have residences there too. Bird Dogs is giving us an indication of what it would be like if we had even 60 and had more outdoor entertainment downtown. And I don't want to duplicate that. And I'm taking that as a good indication. And so I'm still having a problem with 90 in the entertainment district, and I'm glad to see these numbers that in some senses it doesn't matter whether it's mixed at the source or whether it's at the reading location, you're still having a problem.
Remind me why the suggestion was for the entertainment district to change it to the source versus where the complaint originated from?
That was just an ordinance that I pulled from a different city and what they have in downtown Denton. So it seemed to work well for them, and it does make it easier for making the readings.
Yeah, if you can envision one nightclub next to another, and think of it as Sixth Street or something like
Sure,
that,
right.
you're not really gonna know where the music's coming from, right? So if you regulate it at the source, when we go in for an enforcement, we can take a reading and we go from one club to the next, and that would help us from an enforcement aspect. They're all on, the expectation is the same, that they don't exceed the 90 is the recommendation.
So as we're going through and talking about decibels, actually noise, but it appears vibration tends to be the larger complaint. That's correct. How do we had an ordinance before, does anybody recall what it actually said? And how we determined and how we measured vibration and all of that?
It was the reasonable method, right? So if an officer responded and could witness the vibration and it was felt to be unreasonable by the complainant, we were primarily a witness for them.
Why was it changed?
I don't remember.
I mean, I imagine, I mean, like with everything else, I imagine that there's gonna be pros and cons with enforcement, right? I mean, I know I've heard that one, I guess, way to look at it from a reasonable standpoint, as interim chief mentioned, was the vibration on the windows, right? But everybody's got different, types of windows, the age of the windows and the construction's gonna be different, right? So you could have 5 houses right next to each other and 4 don't vibrate and 1 vibrates. And so, I don't know, maybe we can do some more research on how you measure vibration.
Sound pressure,
But
sound pressure meter.
specifically with bird dogs, we know that that's a big part of the concern is the bass and the vibration.
In a couple of downtown residents had reached out to me when this came up initially, and the other concern that was expressed was the extension of the hours. Because I think under the entertainment district, it would go till 2 a.m., whereas now it's cut off at midnight. And kind of the gist of what I heard was, look, we know what we have now, and we've kind of learned to live with that, and we understand that, but if this gets expanded, to longer hours and that sort of thing, that was really gonna create an issue there. So I think that's something we at least need to be cognizant of, and look at that, we're talking about till 2 o'clock in the morning in a place that we're trying to build up more residential use in.
However, 90 decibels is a hairdryer.
Well, when I have
90
my hair,
decibels is a leaf blower.
when I have my
That's
hair
what-
dryer going, I can't hear anything except my hair dryer.
But
That
at
is
the-
too loud.
At the source. So
Right.
if you're in a residential, so you're in a different absolute building, somebody else's hairdryers bother you?
No, but at that point, that decibel reading where you're at isn't gonna be 90, right? This is the source.
It's source, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. Somebody, so a hairdryer and somebody else's is affecting you. I'm not saying that they're blowing a hairdryer in your house.
It's not likely
It's the
to.
hairdryer at the
I'm
source
not
of the
an expert at
hairdryer.
hair dryers.
I don't think that equates, because if you sit in an outdoor music venue, the music coming out of the speakers is louder than a hairdryer.
Correct.
Sorry, it just
Yeah,
is.
no, correct.
And so I'm not sure how that equates to that, to
I'm just,
the hair.
Yeah.
I'm
they
not
were
an
at like
expert.
120, I think, from.
But this is more complicated than just one octave. We're talking about a subwoofer that can, and that's the speaker that gives out the bass, correct?
That's correct.
Is there something lower, even bassier than a subwoofer? And I'm asking because is there any way to measure or and/or regulate the decibels that comes from a subwoofer and instead of a treble speaker? I mean, I guess she said earlier that there was no delineation between the two when you were measuring it, correct?
Mm-hmm.
But does technology allow a way to measure subwoofers different from tweeters and the other,
Yes.
what's the other one?
So, Mr.
Answer
De
is
La Garza,
yes.
are you asking if it's all about that bass, no treble?
Oh, it's all about that bass.
I'm just trying to get your point.
Yeah.
Yes, answer is yes. There are sound pressure meters that measure bass.
Well, and that kind of goes back to the
Because,
point of
well, we
sound.
may have to get more technical instead of just one
Right.
arena, because we're putting them in one hell of a position by just giving them one, machine or one device, electronic device to measure. I mean,
I have a question. You said 60 is the present decibel level.
Right.
I object.
Is that common in the state of Texas? Is it lower in other cities? What was it in the gentleman's house where the windows were vibrating?
48.7, somewhere around in there. I had it on my.
I'd be curious if 60 is,
High
I
enough.
mean, maybe 50 is better.
But if we do it from the source, we wouldn't be worried about the 60 anymore.
That's true.
I mean, a 90 is if you could experience hearing loss if you're exposed to it for more than 30 minutes.
The trouble I have with the source is it depends how far the source is from your house. I mean, if the
Right.
source is right next to you, correct, it's a lot different than if it's 2 blocks down the street.
I think what is more common is source, to be quite honest with you. One of the other challenges, and Mark, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking back to when this, topic first came up, is that, when these calls come in, these calls aren't, high priority compared to other calls that the police department gets. And so sometimes, it's 15, 20 minutes before an officer gets on site. And so oftentimes, the person that called in, is no longer around. And so because of the way the ordinance is written now, there's really nothing that the police department can do because it's not based off the source. Versus if it was based off the source, somebody could call and the police don't even have to talk to anybody at that point. They can just show up and measure at the source without ever having to deal with anybody. And so there's some of those elements to think about, as well in the enforcement part.
Well, and when you also consider the technology and a mixing board, if you will, kind of like looking over Shane's shoulder, I can see the different levels when I talk go up and down. If you're at the point of sound mixing, you can also probably take a look and say, your bass is too high, you need to bring it down. It's an idea, a thought.
Well, not everybody has a mixing board, though, I don't think.
No.
I'd like us to see us go to the source. I think I'd rather see 80, which is 10 times less than 90. It's a logarithmic.
I personally think not 90 for downtown's too high.
But just keep in mind, Greeks 205 came in at 91.
We
I
still
don't know
think
if I
it's too
trust
high.
that reading.
Mark, they don't trust your reading.
I mean, as a single data point, it didn't fall in line with the others. Just like I don't know if I believe the 551.
I will say that the way that we did it, or at least how I did it, is I held it out for 10 seconds, and I took the highest number. And Jerry James was the entertainment that night, and there was one point, and I don't remember, it was a Johnny Cash song, and he hit the 91.9. That was the highest, but typically all of them were well below the 90.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I would take the average or something of them.
Yeah, I think.
No Johnny Cash songs.
Okay, I can understand source, but I think we really need to put the vibration reading
Yes,
back in.
I think that's probably
And need to do a little bit more research on sound pressure meters.
Right. So right now I have adding in some content on vibrations, researching the sound pressure meter, revisit the hours for the downtown not to coincide with the TABC license, and then also 80 decibels at the source.
And that's entertainment district.
Entertainment district.
Well, I think that should be it.
But we need to
all
add the pressure for the ordinance in general.
Well, can't we?
Well, what I'm hearing is that on the point of source, there's desire to consider the entire ordinance to be source, not just entertainment district. So we would need some time to kind of just look at that. That's what the mayor verbalized a few minutes ago.
But not 80 all over town.
Why are the residents downtown gonna have an 80 decibel source and the ones around Bird Dogs don't?
Well, I'm in favor of 60 downtown. I mean,
Then I'm
we're
open.
trying to make an entertainment district where, you know, things are louder and more happening, and unfortunately, the residents downtown
Right.
are there too.
But Jan, keep in mind that we're changing to source, right? So that 60
Right.
number right now is not based off of source, right? So
Right.
going to the hair dryer example, right? Yeah, absolutely. You have the hair dryer right next to your ear, you're not gonna hear anything. But if that hair dryer is 10 feet away, you know, it's not gonna sound as strong, right?
True.
So hence the focus on the source.
And would this apply, I mean, I know we're talking about live music, but would this apply to, say, if you had outdoor dining, you know, on the sidewalk, and you had speakers that were playing music? Would it apply to that as well?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, so if you had, let's say you had 3 or 4 restaurants right next to each other that are all playing music, all hitting the same decibel, I mean, I'm thinking where you're gonna hear that, although each one of them may comply, you get the combination of all of them is what you're hearing. That's gonna be, I don't know, I don't know enough about this topic, but it just seems to me, if you have multiple sources that are all hitting that level, what you hear is gonna be louder.
Well, the other problem I have with the source is if it's in a room that's, like if it's in a club that is pretty soundproof, I don't care how loud it is inside the club.
You're not going to get a complaint then, I don't
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But like, I remember there used to be a club over in the
Tell us a
shopping
story.
center behind, where Halipaskis had his bakery over on John Stockbauer. And in the wintertime, they would open the doors. And I live a half a mile from there, and I could hear the music like they were playing it in my living room.
Dallas
They
Club.
kept the doors closed. It wasn't so bad. But
Dan-
I'm sure it was over 90 probably too.
But then you'd have a complaint and you'd measure at the source at that point.
Right, right.
Danielle, this ordinance or, you know, this proposal is for going to the source and not, what's that other one? At the reading of, not the source, but the other one. Okay. So according to Deputy Chief Jameson, he wouldn't have to go to the original person that called it in, he would just go to the source? Is that what I understood?
That's correct.
Okay.
Couldn't we put it in there for that neighbor that happens to live right next to it, that it's neither higher than 80 at the source or 60 at the receiver?
That makes more sense to me.
Right, and then you got both covered.
Yeah.
You can take the reading wherever, well, it's fine here, but then if it's a continual thing, well, now we're gonna have to deal with
I
the
think that's a
neighbor.
good idea.
Opinion, go ahead.
Yes, if I might speak, we would love to still have the point of the complaint, right? Because that way we have an opportunity to meet the person who's complaining, witness it, take the decibel reading at their location, right? We would like to have both if possible.
Okay.
Danielle, question. In all of your research, and you've looked at other entertainment districts, and they've obviously had decibel readings, things in there, did any of the other entities discuss vibration? And did they have any regulation in regards to that as well? I can't believe that this is just a topic that's unique to Victoria.
I did not see any vibration in the ordinances that I reviewed, other than the one that we previously had back in 2015.
I'd like to be clear, I don't want to go up throughout the rest of the city. We have nightclubs all over town that are adhering to the current ordinance. Why would we raise it from 60 to 80?
But you're not. It's still 60 like it is in the code right now, is what we're proposing. Still be 60 where the sound is received and 80 at the source.
Okay, but we're talking about, this discussion started as the entertainment district and the ordinance for the entertainment district. We expanded it to talk about the ordinance for the entire city.
Because they would have been in conflict with each other, the
Is that a
two sound
problem?
ordinances.
Is that a problem there? We were talking about an entertainment district, and it has other aspects to it. You're not going to be able to carry beverages outside in other parts of the city. it's an entertainment district. We're creating a different animal. You may or may not agree with me.
I like having the option to do source or receiving. You're not really changing the rest of the,
I guess I don't have a problem with adding source, but I don't want to go from 60 to 80.
but the
In
current
the
code.
entertainment, yes.
But the current code doesn't deal with source at all.
Okay.
And it's gonna be it's either gonna be 80 at the source and say it's 50 at that residence, or it's 80 at the source and it's 70 at the residence, in which case there's an issue. 80 is not, is too high at the source. They're gonna have to turn it down because it's 70 at the residence, so it needs to get down to 60, so they need to turn their volume down at the source. But it gives the officers the ability, like you said, to do both measurements if they need to. Like, yeah, the 80 is still causing a problem because it's not complying with the 60.
I'm going to have to think about it.
Okay. Well, luckily, we're not voting tonight.
That would also help the police officer because it would be uniform throughout the city. He wouldn't have to think, okay, am I here, am I there, where am I? I would think, I don't know.
All right. You
Okay.
got some more on this or not?
That's it.
That's the big sticker.
Great job.
Thank you.
I'll come back with more. Thank you for the feedback.
F2,
No
Mr.
pun
Gill.
intended. No pun intended. Thank you for the feedback.
Good evening. I'm going to go pretty quick.
Okay.
Going to talk about the rain event we had January 7th. Real quick, it was high intensity, short duration. We do good. Victoria does good. Low intensity, long duration. It could be the same 25-year storm. We handle those. We just don't like those short, fast, hard rains. This is what we received a lot of calls, complaints, received some news media coverage. That shows you some of the locations are sporadic across town. On the right is the inundation map that was done in the master plan update. It's a great tool that we use that confirmed a lot of these drainage areas that are receiving, we're having drainage complaints. It confirmed it. The hot spots is in that middle of the map. You'll see the bright yellow and some red. That's Red River Heights. We know that. It modeled out as being a concentrated area. These are some of the specifics. Got some pictures from the newspaper. This is Red River Heights. This is Ben Wilson, Red River, Cherry, Catalpa. It goes all the way, even affected Sam Houston and Rio Grande Street. So as Lone Tree Creek gets up, it backs up, and that hydraulic grade line backs it all the way up Red River, all the way to Ben Wilson. So it's been an issue for many years. It's in our master drainage plan recommendations, estimated cost of $18 million because of how far you have to go downstream to get that grade line reduced.
This is the box culvert under Red River.
Yes, that's the one. Next one is Mayfair Terrace. This is Lone Tree, Lone Tree, Hanselman area, right by Swan Crossing. This neighborhood was studied in a master drainage plan, and it was again restudied in, I think, around 2012. Another independent study was done. Several houses are impacted during these hard rains. Estimated cost of $8 million for this project. It's going to increase some storm sewer going up Lova and in on the side streets. The next one is kind of a new one for us because it's a relatively new structure. It's the Navarro Underpass. The pump station is a TxDOT facility. For some reason, this thing has been getting affected more recently, and I don't know if it's because of the power issue that's going to it, but one of the recommendations would be to harden the pump station, the electrical panel, possibly put a generator. Estimated cost $1.5 million. Again, it would be a TxDOT. We're in conversation with them trying to figure out why this thing keeps tripping out.
Did we get that inlet cleaned up where they had
Yes.
milled and overlaid? And so
Yes,
that
we
wasn't
did.
it this
We
time.
cleaned out the inlets, it's clean.
But I mean, remember they'd built up the asphalt
Yes,
and
they
necked
did.
it down?
They did mill some of that out. That still may be an issue, but I don't think it is because when this thing backs up, I've seen it, it's not draining at all. So that means that pump station's out. So we've been talking to the local district office, help this thing, because they don't like going out there either when that red light's on. Next one, Cimarron area. Again, this was identified in the master drainage plan. Improvements to the storm sewer on Airline and into Cimarron neighborhood. I want to note, this one's $4 million. I want to note a lot of these drainage complaints in areas were developed pre-1978, pre-1980. That was our first master drainage plan. We changed a lot of things. Well, we didn't change anything. We started new processes, new calculations. A lot of these neighborhoods were literally done before that master drainage plan, that first one. Next one, couple are Bronson Terrace. We had some isolated areas in there. Improved storm sewer system and Linwood Ditch, estimated cost of $3 million. Leary Lane, the sidewalk flooded. Again, that's because of the downstream. It's got a lot of brush in it. It needs to be cleaned all the way to Lone Tree Creek. That's part of that Shenandoah Ditch, estimated cost of $1 million. Mockingbird Lane, that's been ongoing for many years, and that's in the master drainage plan to improve the storm sewer system to Spring Creek, I believe, and that's estimated at $6 million. Then we have Laurent Underpass, same type thing, pump station improvements, estimated at 1.5. And then last but not least, Lone Tree Acres, we've got that one already on our CIP. Again, master drainage plan recommendations to improve the roadside ditches and Lone Tree Creek. Some of our proactive maintenance, I want to let you know we are taking steps. We're doing a lot of open ditch cleaning. We're doing about 3,000 feet a year. Streets is doing storm sewer cleaning at 350,000 linear feet. That has improved. Talking to the citizens, they see it go down faster.
Ought to have been a good cleaning of them.
Yes, we are. Yes, true. It does help. Street sweeping, again, we're going to start that when we get those street sweepers. That's going to help keep that debris out of the inlets. I think that's going to be a big plus. And improve that capacity of the gutters and the streets. They'll drain better. And then routinely, we clean the concrete line channels. For instance, the one up North Outfall in front of the mall and some of those, we do get in there and scrape those out and clean them. Conclusions, got the highlighted areas. There may be more as we, hear from citizens. Drainage master plan confirmed those flooding patterns we saw with the flood inundation map. And outfalls in major creeks are experiencing siltation, reducing flow capacities and affecting that hydraulic grade line. And that brings the issue of funding mechanisms, which are drainage assessment fees, a drainage impact fee, or other mechanisms. In my last slide, I'm going to let Jesus talk on the timeline for the...
Sure, thank you, Ken. So obviously, drainage improvements are very costly, right? Ken, stay up there. If you add all those up, that was close to $50 million in improvements. And we know that the drainage master plan actually had over $200 million worth of improvements in it. So we know that that's expensive, even though staff has done a great job in finding creative solutions to be better at maintenance. You may recall that last year we purchased a new vacuum truck, but didn't get rid of the old one. We kept it so that that could be focused by street crews to do some of the cleanouts of storm drainage, which hadn't been done before. So we're doing the best we can. However, in the absence of having a dedicated funding source, everything related to stormwater and drainage competes with everything else, right? Think of our two major sources of revenue, right? Being the general fund, which are the COs for projects, and then our utility fund, which is the revenue bonds that we issue for utility projects. And every year we go through the CIP process, and rightfully so, prioritize streets, and utilities, because those are things that are needed more 24/7, 365. It's not uncommon for cities to have dedicated funding sources for drainage projects, and the method in which they do that is through a stormwater fee. Our drainage master plan recommended that we explore that option, and during this fiscal year, we're beginning the process to hire a firm that's not only going to come in and assess potentially establishing a stormwater fee, but also looking at our water and sewer rates, because we want to make sure that all of these things are looked at collectively and together, because ultimately it's important for us to look at the big picture together as opposed to looking at these in silos. And so where we are with that process is that we're finalizing the RFQ currently. We will issue the RFQ in March, and we expect that sometime in May, we would be ready to award that contract with that company, so they can start the process at looking at that. It's unlikely that that process would be completed in time for the adoption or the presentation of fiscal year '24. But my goal is that hopefully we can wrap that study up by the end of the calendar year, so that hopefully going into spring of '24 and going into conversations for fiscal year '25, which we adopt in the summer of '24, we can have hopefully, you know, an educated conversation about the stormwater fee. But it'll take time, you know, to look at that and to develop that. In the meantime, you know, we'll continue to look at including projects in the CIP, similar to the Lone Tree drainage project that's in the CIP now, and continue to do the best we can with the street crews and others on the daily maintenance.
Can you go back one slide? It says outfalls and major creeks experiencing siltation, reducing the flow. Is the drainage district responsible for that at all?
Some of the areas that's within their district, they are cleaning those. They are helping us, such as parts of Lone Tree Creek, they are helping on, and they do routine maintenance on those. We do have contacted them, and they do. But some of the ones north side of town, no, it's not in that drainage district.
On any of these, is Cimarron in the Drainage District 3?
It is, but again, they're gonna focus on not installation improvements. They're focusing on the larger creeks and the outfalls. That's been their main focus, not cleaning out storm sewers or grading roadside ditches.
Maybe we can visit with them, because I know 68% of their revenue comes from inside the city limits.
Very true.
And if residents aren't happy with their drainage district, they can all vote to change the way they're taxed to beneficial use tax, which means that you pay for your acreage.
Right.
Without ag exemptions.
Yeah, I know there's been discussion a lot with the drainage district, so it may be time to get back in front of them and start discussing the other options.
How much rain did we get that day?
I've heard anywhere from 4 inches to up to 6 inches.
Oh.
4 inches was, 3 to 4 inches was the average, what I heard, and that was in an hour and a half, 2 hours time, which is a lot.
And in the middle of the night.
And yes, middle of the night.
Mr. Gill, you know that I've contacted you. I've been contacted by some people in the Mosswood
Yes.
apartment complex. Their parking lot flooded also. Could you kind of address or explain what you've explained to me about that?
Yes, on that one, I did actually pull the plans from the apartment complex. It was built in 75, I believe, 78. In looking at the plans, they have very limited internal drainage. I think they have 3 inlets in the whole complex. If they did do, they showed another site plan where they added a couple more, but their issue was their elevation at the parking lot at the driveway is such that there's no overland relief. In other words, we try to get our streets where it'll get 6 inches deep, it'll crack over and go to the next section, get 6 inches, and it just keeps that depth at 6 to 8 inches. Primarily, we did that was for emergency vehicles. We want to get those in. That one, it just builds up, and it can't overland relief out into the street. So that's what's causing that parking lot. Solution, improve the storm drainage system internal is probably the easiest thing that they could do, or revise some of their parking lot, maybe make a couple of overland relief areas, cut it down a little bit.
Thank you.
But all private. All right, thank you.
All right, next is executive session.
You have a couple items for us?
In executive session?
Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
And
we
we'll
have our-
do that at City Hall.
Okay.
Are you ready?
At this time, the city council will recess into executive session. We do not intend to come back and reconvene.
The city council will recess for executive session on the 17th day of January 2023 at 7:44 PM. The subject matter of the deliberation is as follows: Texas Government Code 551.087, 551.072, 551.074, and 551.071.